Hmm. Alright, doing another one of these. It feels like it's been a while. Certainly a couple weeks. Ugh. But it's fitting to do one tonight because I watched a movie today and I'm fucking tired. What movie did I watch today? Well, I finally got around to watching um, the new Dune movie that came out. Um, that's better. The new Dune movie that came out, the one that's directed by Denis Villeneuve. Fucking hate that stupid fucking name. French asshole. Your name is Dennis, bitch. But whatever. Anyways, so yeah, Dennis Villeneuve made a new version of the movie Dune. And that's what I watched. I say a new movie, a new version of the movie Dune, because Dune, if for anyone who might not be aware, was originally a science fiction novel that was written in the 60s, I want to say. And then in the 80s, it was made into a movie directed by David Lynch that he disliked so much that he wanted his name taken off of it. It wasn't, but he wanted nothing to do with it. And then, I want to say in the late 90s or early 2000s, the Sci-Fi Network actually made a Dune TV miniseries that was actually pretty good. And they actually even made it two sequels to it. Based on the following, the two books that followed it. But that, you know what, that might be important because I feel like the idea of this new Dune movie is to make a whole new science fiction franchise, and there's a lot of Dune books. I mean, a lot of them. Just the first 6 were written by Frank Herbert, but then he had a bunch of notes of like other books he wanted to write. So then, like, his son went and wrote, like, I mean, I think there's like, I want to say 15 books in total. That might actually be an underestimate. It might actually be more like 17. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them, and I've read them all. I actually really love this series. I love Dune. I love the whole series. It's probably my favorite science fiction book. But to be fair, it has been quite a while since I've read it. I read it in high school, which was however long ago. It was a while ago. What am I talking about? Yeah. So Dune was a book. It's very good. I enjoyed it a lot. So I had high hopes for this. I like I said, I've never seen all of the 84 movie. It's very 80s science fiction, which can sometimes be good or bad. I've seen that TV miniseries, which I actually liked. I thought it was pretty good. It was pretty ambitious, especially for the Sci-Fi Channel, which, you know, I mean, the Sci-Fi Channel that was a network that is really all over the place. It could make either some of the most fantastic science fiction you can see on TV, or it can make shit that is the quality of a fucking softcore porno. I mean, it's unfucking real how you never know what you're gonna get. But focus, Matt. I'm talking about the new Dune movie. I want to preface this by saying, because I love this book so much, that I had high hopes for this movie when I heard it was being made. and I was very much under the impression that it was going to be at least an attempt for a new franchise, because you have to factor in the business sense. Not every, especially when things are going to be these big blockbuster events, you can't always take into account that they're going to be very artistic. Of course, the director probably has, the eye of an artist, and they want to make a thing in their style and everything. But when somebody's throwing that much money at the production of a movie, it's because they expect return on investment. It's a business decision, which is fine. It's, I've watched, plenty of franchise genre movies that were definitely about making money, and some of them can actually be pretty goddamn fun. Okay, so I was very hyped for this movie when I heard about it. There are a few things that tempered the hype a little bit, like finding out that despite only covering the first book, the movie was going to be split into two. Like the first movie, the one I just watched, despite being nearly 3 hours, doesn't even cover half of the first book. It covers like a little over a third of it. Maybe not even that. Let's just say a third of it. A third of the book of the original Dune novel is covered in this first nearly 3-hour movie. You think, well, then they'll have plenty of time to tell the full story then. Not really, because they actually cut shit out of it, which is actually kind of aggravating, and I'll get to a little bit. But I was not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of them splitting like one book into multiple movies. I didn't like they did that with The Hobbit a couple of years back. That was stupid. I felt it ruined the story. Anywho, then also I heard this movie came out like almost a month ago. So seriously, it's you could see it on HBO Max, and it came out over a month ago. Or not over a month ago, almost a month ago. So when I went to go see it today, I was the only person in the theater. Literally. That's not the first time that's happened, but it is kind of funny that happened again. I was literally the only person in the fucking theater I was watching it, which is whatever. It's kind of a cool experience to have a movie theater experience completely on your own. But I think that was good, because then when I went and I had heard not good reviews of this movie after it first came out. I heard people kind of shit on it a little bit. So the reviews weren't all bad, but they were definitely mixed. And but then like the weekend after it was released, it was announced that the movie was getting a sequel. So yay, they're actually going to finish the whole story of the first book, which is nice. I mean, it's a long ass story, so. But anyways, they're gonna do that. Shit. But I'm glad that I kind of got those bad reviews, because it kind of went in with me having the expectation that, oh, this is gonna suck, and I went and watched it. I'm like, it's actually not that bad. Is it as good as I'd hoped it would be? No, but it was pretty good. The problem isn't necessarily the movie itself. Like I said, I love the story, but it's also like kind of the guy who made it, old fucking Frenchy Dennis Dennis Villeneuve. I'm calling him Dennis. Fuck him. He this isn't the first one of his movies that I've seen. I saw that fucking Blade Runner sequel he did, and I think I saw something else he did. I can't remember what though. But all his movies have this kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. They have this weird dullness to them, like a dull look is the best I can explain it. Like everything just seems, despite it being science fiction-y and having a like all this futuristic technology and amazing shit, everything just seems kind of dull. Like a lot of his scenes have a very like almost gray tinge to them. Everything just seems kind of like boring, almost like he's intentionally doing it that way. I'm not explaining this well, but that's the best I can. It's like a visual feeling almost. If that's a weird description, but it looks like it feels boring. I think. Anyways, I did overall like this movie though. I thought it was good. And I do look forward to the sequel. For anyone who isn't familiar with the story, let me go through a few things. The movie, it takes place like 1,000 years in the fucking future. In this future, humanity has long since abandoned Earth and gone out into the stars. There's a whole mythos, and there's different factions and different groups and different characters with different abilities that some get explained, some don't, and even with the explanations aren't full explanations, are really good explanations, and there's slight differences, variations from the books a little bit, but basically there's an organization of all these planets. The main organization is called the Landsraad. The Landsraad is a group of nobles who each run their own planet, and the nobles have different noble fucking stations like like Duke or Count or Baron, and then there's one noble who runs the Landsraad, and he is the Emperor, and his family basically runs everything. At this current time, the Emperor is Shaddam Carino the Fourth, I think. And he's the head of House Carino, and he is the Emperor of the known universe. We're not going to go into him that much because we don't see, despite being mentioned constantly in the movie, you don't see him, which is weird because he's a major character in the book, and we definitely see him early on, but they don't have him in this movie at all. I'm assuming he'll be in the sequel, as will his daughter, who is very important, even more important than him. I'm assuming she'll be in the sequel as well. So why is this important? Well, like I said, each family has their own planet that they run. But there's also this one planet that's known as Arrakis. Arrakis is a desert planet that seems almost uninhabitable, despite the fact that people do live there. There's a group, the natives of Arrakis are known as Fremen, and they are the only ones who know how to survive on this hazardous desert planet. There's not a lot of living things. The major life forms on this planet are these giant sandworms that are huge and can't really be killed, and they have to, the best you can do is try to distract them or lure them away. They are the alpha predators of Arrakis. But the Fremen know how to live with them and can even ride them if they're skilled enough. But the thing about Arrakis is it has this one thing. It has a resource. It has this weird substance found in the sand that's known as spice. It's referred to as spice, but it's called melange. It's this weird cinnamon-looking substance that is like a psychoactive drug that can have various different results for people. It can, can extend lifespans. It can make people feel healthier. It can affect people's minds. It's even used to help expand the minds of people, and even in full immersion can transform people into what are known as navigators. These weird human-esque creatures that can pierce the veils of time and space, and they're the ones who are these navigators are the ones who are responsible for basically allowing people to travel through space, because they have spaceships that can travel through like hyperspace, so they can like travel from like very far distances in very short periods of time. Like how you've seen in fucking dozens of fucking science fiction movies. They travel through like a wormhole or something, and they just go real fast and shit, and they're just in one place really quickly. The problem is, in doing that, you have to be able to navigate so you don't like basically teleport into a fucking star or an asteroid or something. That's what the navigators do. They use their psychic abilities to plot the path for this almost teleportation-like travel. Now you might be thinking, why don't they just use computers? Because computers are outlawed in this society. There was an issue thousands of years earlier where artificial intelligence took over and enslaved humanity, and humanity had to fight back. And ever since then, computers have been outlawed. Any machine that can think like a human is outlawed. That is never explained in the movie. They don't really get into the navigators that much. You don't even see a navigator in the movie. And they don't explain why navigators are necessary. They do show a navigator ship, these things called highliners, that are these massive ships that carry other ships to places through space. And they're, like I said, with Denis Villeneuve, everything looked kind of boring, and the Highlander looked super boring. It looks like a fucking metal toilet paper tube thing. But it's never explained, like, why they don't use computers or anything like that. They never go into that computers are outlawed. The main characters of the story is because it's a conflict between two houses. There's House Atreides, who are the main protagonists of the story, and House Harkonnen, who are the main antagonists. These are two houses that have hated each other for centuries, and the Harkonnens are kind of vilified in the universe as this very awful family that everybody hates and nobody respects, and they basically rule through fear and the accumulation of power. Now, they have been in control of planet Arrakis for like 80 years. Now when a family controls Arrakis, they're in charge of mining the spice, because a lot of people want spice, so it's their job to mine it, and they get to make a lot of money off of that, and they pay a tax to the emperor. The Harkonnens have been doing that for 80 years, so it's made them a very powerful family. Now all of a sudden, they've been ordered to give up control of Arrakis by the Emperor and give control to House Atreides. Now in the book, there's an understanding that this is a normal thing, that a family runs Arrakis for a while, makes some money doing it, and then at a certain point the Emperor says, okay, your time is done, and they pass it on to another family in the Lanzaret. That's a process that the Emperor does, and then everybody pays a tax to the Emperor. That way, everybody gets a taste of the profits from the spice, and nobody can complain that, it's like, well, I didn't get a chance to make this. So everybody gets a chance to make that kind of money, and the Emperor gets his taste of it. In the movie, it just says that it's like mysteriously that the Harkonnens are ordered off. But then the next people who are brought in are the Atreides, and everybody realized, like, why would you bring in the Harkonnens mortal enemy, the Atreides, to take their place. This almost seems like a slap in the face. That's by design. The Emperor, it's established pretty early on that the Emperor is trying to set up a war between these two families, that the Harkonnens are going to take them down, because the Atreides are a very popular family in the Landsrat. And the Emperor doesn't like this. He doesn't like that. He feels like he's being threatened by the Atreides' popularity. So he wants them wiped out, and he wants to give the Harkonnens an excuse to do it, by basically forcing them in a position where they have to take Arrakis back from the Atreides. The main characters of the Atreides are, of course, the main character of the book would be Paul Atreides, who is played by Timothée Chalamet. Timothée Chalamet is Hollywood's new favorite, twinkish-looking dude. He looks like he's fucking all of 14 years old, but I think he's actually in his mid-20s. I think he's like 25, 26, something like that. I insult the guy, but I actually do like him. I've seen him in a few things. He's a pretty good actor. Next up would be the Duke and leader of House Atreides, Duke Leto Atreides, played by Oscar Isaac. Oscar Isaac is, of course, a very popular actor, and he's very good in this. He's pretty good in this role. I mean, Leto gets spoiler alert. Leto gets killed off relatively early on in the book, at least. In the movie, it happens closer to the end. Well, a little bit past the halfway point. But, Oscar Isaac is good in the role. Then there's, of course, the Lady Jessica, who's played by Rebecca Ferguson. The Lady Jessica is Paul's mother, and she is not Duke Leto's wife. She is not a woman of high birth, so he can't marry her. It's his responsibility as a man of high birth to marry a woman of high birth from another family to basically join the two families together. Jessica is basically she's not referred to this in the movie, but in the book she's referred to as his concubine, basically like his kept woman, but she's the mother of his son, who's his heir to the fucking House Atreides, so she is given a place of importance regardless. Duke Atreides has 3 trusted advisors. That would be Gurney Halleck, who's played by Josh Brolin, who's a very stern, warlike man, who's also into like poetry and music. Then there would be what the fuck is that dude's name? Thufir Hawat, played by Stephen McKinley, who is that his name? Why do I have him listed as Stephen Henderson? Oh yeah, Stephen McKinley. Stephen McKinley plays Thufir Hawat. And I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted here. I apologize. Now, Thufir Hawat is... Here's another thing that doesn't get explained. Thufir Hawat is the fucking family's mentat. And you see at a point where his eyes go white, where he's like calculating something. And you're like, what the fuck is that? They don't even call him a mentat. They don't even explain what mentats are. I mentioned earlier how in this world, computers that can think like humans are outlawed. So to make up for that, they have trained groups of humans to think like computers. These are mentats. These are people who have been trained to think like a machine. They can calculate information incredibly fast. And every family has at least one, because their skills are highly, highly prized and valued. Thufir Hawat is that for the House Atreides. And then finally, House Atreides also has what is known as a sword master, who are these highly trained and skilled warriors. Their sword master is Duncan Idaho, who's played by Jason Momoa. This is what makes me believe they plan to turn. He's who makes me believe that they plan to turn all the books, or as many as they can, into movies, because he gets killed towards the end of the movie. In the book, it's relatively early on. He gets killed, and his death is this big emotional thing. In the book, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, he died. But it makes me believe that they really do plan to turn this whole thing into a franchise, because they have Jason Momoa, who's a very popular actor, play a role that gets killed off like that. It's just like, it seems kind of weird. It's like, but if you know anything about the books, you know his character comes back. It's a long story to explain, but he comes back, and he's actually a main character in every book after the first one. So it would make sense that they might want to do that with Jason Momoa. Anyways, that's basically House Atreides. Like I said, Paul is the main character. Now, then there's House Harkonnen. House Harkonnen is run by Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who is played by Stellan Skarsgård, who does a very good job of it, because the Skarsgårds are very good at playing creepy characters, and the Baron is a very creepy evil man, and Stellan Skarsgård nails it. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen's right-hand man is his nephew, who is known as Beast Glasu Raban. Beast Glasu Raban Harkonnen. And he's just kind of a vicious idiot, who's played by Dave Bautista. And he's just kind of a vicious idiot who just, carries out acts of cruelty on behalf of his, evil but much more intelligent uncle. This is another case of where a character is missing from the story who's actually super important. There's actually, Raban has a younger brother named Fade, who is actually favored by Baron Harkonnen and is basically being groomed to be the next person in charge of House Harkonnen. He is not seen or mentioned anywhere in this movie. I'm assuming he'll be in the sequel because he's, like I said, a very important character. House Harkonnen also has their own mentat, a guy named Piter de Vries. Not only do they not mention that this guy is a fucking mentat just like Thufir, I don't think they even say his name. So, and he's played by David Malkian. I don't know how you pronounce his last name, but you've probably seen that actor before. He's been in a bunch of shit. Oh yeah, and House Atreides also has a family doctor that are known as Suk doctors. S-U-K, I think it's called. They're these special group of doctors who are highly trained physicians who are basically prized on being very loyal and not betraying whatever family they serve. Their family doctor is named Dr. Wellington Yue, who is played by actor Chang Chen. Now, before we even get to Arrakis, House Atreides is on their home planet of Caladan, which is a water world. Paul Atreides, who who I mentioned is the main character, he's haunted by these weird dreams, these weird, almost prophetic dreams. Dreams that are like half prophetic, half metaphor. And he keeps seeing this woman in it. This woman who is a Fremen woman on Arrakis, who's played by the actress Zendaya. We later come to learn that this woman he's dreaming of is named Chani. She'll come into things a little later. It's weird how much they promoted that Zendaya is in this movie, and she's barely in it. I think she has maybe like 20 minutes of screen time, and it's like a over 2.5 hour movie. She's only shows up in a few dreams, and then when she actually does talk, she doesn't talk much because she just has a few scenes. She'll be a bigger part of the second one, though, for sure. So yeah, Paul keeps having these weird dreams. It's fucking with his head. His mother, his mother is part of a group called the Bene Gesserit. This gets touched on a little bit. The Bene Gesserit are like seen as like a group of witches. They're these women with very unique and special abilities, mental and physical abilities. Now, Jessica, like I said, is a member of the Bene Gesserit. She's been training Paul with her abilities. The Sisterhood is kind of pissed with Jessica because she was supposed to have a daughter. See, the Bene Gesserit have a special breeding program that they've been running for centuries. The point of the program is to cross the bloodlines of different Grace houses to produce a man who would be able to master their unique abilities and be able to basically be omniscient, to be able to look through space and time and know everything everywhere. So become an omniscient being. This is known as, they call this the Kwisatz Haderach. Jessica was supposed to have a daughter so she could, they didn't say who she was supposed to mate with, though I do know from reading the book. But her daughter was supposed to come from House Atreides and then mate with another, a son of another great family, and their offspring would be the Kwisatz Haderach. But Jessica kind of jumped it a little bit. They just make it seem like she did it out of an act of defiance. But in truth, if you know the books like I do, because I read them all, you know she did it because she's in love with Duke Leto, and Leto wanted a son, so she decided to give him a son. We later learn that Jessica is currently pregnant with a daughter. Actually, I don't think they say it's a daughter, so oops. But yeah, we do learn she's currently pregnant and is with a daughter. She's an important character later on too. Paul gets tested by this Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit named Gaius Helen Mohiam, and she's played by an actress named Charlotte Rampling. The scene's taken almost exactly out of the book. It's a test of Paul's abilities. I have to say Rebecca Ferguson is very good as Lady Jessica. She might have been the best acting. She might have given the best acting performance in the movie, in my opinion. I thought she was great. So there's a test of Paul. He learns that he might have some weird... They're not quite sure if he is the Kwisatz Haderach or whatever, but he's definitely seeing things. And Paul learns that he now has some kind of weird destiny. He's part of some weird breeding program. They go to Arrakis, and like I said, on Arrakis, the natives are known as Fremen. Now, the Fremen have had a very antagonistic relationship with the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens are a vicious, brutal people that were very, very hostile to the Fremen. the Atreides sent Duncan Idaho ahead to basically make contact with the Fremen and try to form an alliance with them. Duncan comes in contact with one of the Fremen sieges. The sieges are basically, there's many groups of Fremen out in the desert, and they each have their own little communities that are known as sieges, where they live basically in mountains and underground and shit. Duncan comes in contact with one of these sieges and arranges for a meeting between House Atreides and leader of the siege, a man known as Stilgar, who's played by Javier Bardem. He's pretty good, but he's not in the movie a lot. They have basically a very short meeting with him. He seems, unimpressed with them, but like whatever. He figures if they're not as bad as the Harkonnens, that's better for his people. So okay, whatever. He basically says, "I don't want anything from you. Leave me alone, and we'll leave you alone." That's basically the promise he makes. He's like, "Take your spice, but don't bother my people." There's numerous attempts on House Atreides. There seems to be sabotage everywhere. There's an attempt on Paul's life. It definitely seems like the Harkonnens are coming back, and you see this other background shit. You see meetings between Baron Harkonnen and Reverend Mother Mohiam, and you keep getting... while you never see the Emperor, you see that Baron Harkonnen has been talking to the Emperor, and the Emperor definitely wants House Harkonnen to strike at the Atreides and wipe them out. He's even the Emperor is even lending his own personal army, the Sardaukar, who are these highly trained, very deadly soldiers, for when the Baron eventually invades, which happens relatively quickly. And you see that the House Atreides is betrayed from within. You learn that the traitor is Dr. Wellington Yue, the guy who is not supposed to betray. But House Harkonnen has his wife, and he wants her back. And so he betrays the Emperor, or betrays Duke Leto. But then he says, "Listen, here's what I can do for you, though." He's like, "I can try to help your son." And he puts a poisoned tooth in his mouth, and he says, "When you get close to the Baron," he's like, "bite down on this, and you can basically spray poison out of your mouth into the air of the whatever room you're in." He goes, "You will die, but if you do it right, you can take the Baron with you." It's like, so at least you get what you want. So while Yue does what he's supposed to and betrays House Atreides, he ends up dying for it regardless. Baron Harkonnen just kills him because he's a piece of shit. And then Duke Leto does manage to blow poison in his face, but everyone in the room dies, including Peter de Vries, but Baron Harkonnen manages to escape it. See, Baron Harkonnen is so fat, he has these like weird like things attached to him that allow him to like float through the air, so he's able to like float away when the poison gets sprayed at him, and he he escapes being killed by it. Another important character in this was a woman known as Liette Kynes, who's played by Sharon Duncan Brewster. She's interesting because in the book, Liette Kynes is a man, but they gender swap the role, which isn't super important because it's another character that dies early on. She's the Emperor's planetary ecologist to Dune, and she's basically supposed to help with the transition between the two houses. She manages to help Paul and Jessica after the Harkonnens invade and wipe out most of the Atreides. And it seems like she's planning on reporting to the Landsraad that the Emperor betrayed House Atreides and helped the Harkonnens set them up and take them down, but she's killed by the Sardaukar and ends up dying before she can. But we learn that she's actually Fremen, and she's actually connected to another character, but I don't know if they'll get into that in the second movie or not. Paul and Jessica get helped by Duncan, which I don't think happened in the book. I don't recall that happening. But he helps them for a little bit, but then they get attacked by the Sardaukar again, and he dies just before Liet Kynes dies. You don't see what happens to Gurney Halleck or Thufir Hawat. I'm sure that'll be covered later on in the second movie. Out in the desert, Jessica and Paul manage to survive, and they figured, like, well, if they can get to the Fremen can help them get off planet. They find a group of Fremen led by Stilgar, and the Fremen just want to kill them and take their water. See, to the Fremen, the only thing that's important is water. And when you're part of their tribe, like, your water belongs to the tribe. And when you die, they'll actually, like, drain your body of all its moisture. They even have these special suits called still suits that allow them to recycle all their moisture into, like, drinking water so they don't waste anything. They're very big on not wasting water. Water is more precious than gold to them because, they live out in the desert. And like I said, Paul kept having visions of them and of particularly of a girl, and she has a vision of this. He has a vision of this guy who's like says he's going to help him learn about the desert and become one with the desert. And you're like, what is going on? Because you have to realize everything is not just straight prophetic vision he's having. A lot of it is also metaphor. So he just has these weird moments where he sees and hears things and he reacts weirdly. And it's just like, what is going on with this kid? Oh, another thing about Paul is that on Arrakis, a lot of the Fremen believe that he might be part of some prophecy they have of a Messiah, or as they refer to it, the Mahdi. Their Mahdi is known as the Lisan al-Gaib, who is an outsider who is supposed to help come liberate the Fremen and help them take back control of their home planet. That gets mentioned a lot too. So they find the Fremen. Stilgar kind of wants to... He seems sympathetic toward them and he wants to help them. Especially if he finds out that they're not easy to kill. And, like, Jessica kind of fights him and shows that, she's no pushover. So Stilgar decides to take it with him, but one of his guys isn't so accepting of that. And he says he wants to kill Jessica. And Paul decides to fight for his mother. Now everybody just assumes that this guy will kill Paul, but Paul actually even sees visions of him fighting the guy and getting killed in the fight just before it happens. Now one of the Fremen they run into this group is the girl he's been dreaming about, Chani. And she gives Paul her crysknife, which are knives that Fremens have that are made out of the teeth of the sandworms. The sandworms are what they refer... the Fremen refer to the sandworms as Shai Hulud, which is basically their word for their god. She gives Paul his crysknife. Now, a rule with a crysknife, something they don't say out loud, but they demonstrate, is that once a crysknife is drawn, you can't resheath it until it has drawn blood. So there's a scene where they all have their knives out, but they don't actually fight. So they decide. So before they put them away, they all cut the back of their hand, so at least it's drawn blood. It's just a rule. Paul takes a Chris knife, fights the dude, and kills him. He hesitates at first because he's never killed anyone before, but he eventually has to do it. He kills the guy, and he then is now accepted as a member of the Fremen, basically taking the guy's place. And when you realize earlier when he had like this prophetic vision where he saw the same guy he just killed, and the guy was saying like, I'm going to help teach you everything about the desert, it's just like, so wait, is his vision with what combined with what really his weird metaphorical vision combined with what really happened is he like taking the place of this black guy? It's like, it seems almost weirdly like blatant cultural appropriation, which I knew there were going to be arguments about that in this movie, which I definitely seen. It's like the movie. It's like there's like a white saviorism in the movie. It's like, of course, that is the story. It is a story of a white savior. It's a story of a guy coming to a fucking desert planet full of brown-skinned people, a white guy doing this and liberating them from other white people. That's the story. There's just no other way to put it. And, if you think about it, the whole thing is a metaphor for the Middle East and Europe's treatment of the Middle East, because the Middle East is just just has a shit ton of oil in it, despite being an uninhabitable. It has no other value to outsiders other than its oil. So, but yeah, yeah, I think that's all the characters. But yeah, the movie basically ends with Paul and Jessica going off with the fucking Fremen out into the desert to start a new life, because Paul has decided that it's like, no, this is his role, not to leave Arrakis. He's like, it's time for me to become. He feels like this is his destiny. That the visions he's been having have been leading him directly to this moment. In fact, when he decides to kill the guy, you realize this is the moment where he is becoming who he's supposed to be. That everything has been leading towards this. This is his first step in becoming this new person, accepting his role as the Kwisatz Haderach / Lisan Al Gaib, this new figure, and accepting his real place, accepting his destiny. It's time he met it and moved on with it. And somehow that involved him killing a guy. I don't know. So yeah, it's like the movie ends rather abruptly, and it's just like this because it's not a complete story. It's not the end. Like I said, it's like about a third of the way through the first book, so it's like there's definitely a lot more story to tell. And like I said, they haven't even introduced every character. There's still a bunch of characters to introduce to really complete everything. So it felt like an unfinished story. It had a haze of dullness to it. Everything looked a little off. The still suits looked fine. The one thing that really good is they travel around Arrakis in these weird things called ornithopters. They're kind of like a combination between, plane and helicopter that almost looks like a bug. But I gotta say, they kind of nailed the design of those. Those looked exactly like I pictured them from the book. Yeah, it's fucking weird, but it's at the same time it's good. it's it had a tinge of don't, but it worked. It worked pretty well. I feel like I haven't told much of the story, but it's like I told what was there. Like there's a scene. It's a 2.5 hour movie. It goes by relatively quickly. It doesn't drag that much at all, actually. At least I didn't feel like it did. I was worried it was going to, but it didn't. And which it easily could have because I already know the story, and they didn't really change much. Oddly enough, they did subtract things. They subtracted a scene. They actually subtracted a pretty big scene where the members of House Atreides have like this very big formal dinner with the members of House Corino, with the Emperor and his wife and his oldest daughter, who, like I said, is a very important character, and she talks with Paul. And there's definitely like you get hints of like the political machinations that are going on here, and that there's a lot of tension. And it's actually a pretty important scene. It just got cut out of the movie. It's like is that just because you didn't want the Emperor and his daughter, who are major characters in this movie? It's like, why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't you want that scene? It's just a strange thing. So there were weird, strange decisions with casting and storytelling, and it's just like they didn't even know for certain they were getting a second movie. They didn't confirm the second movie until after the first one came out. So they could have just told this movie it could have fucking bombed, and it's like we just have like an incomplete story that's nobody's gonna give two shits about because it's not a real story. It's it's just weird. But they are getting another story. They are getting another movie. So I'm glad. I'm glad that they'll be able to complete this. I'm glad to see what it'll look like. I mean, it was pretty visually impressive. You know, Paul has a vision of a great battle where he's leading one of the sides, and that looked pretty cool. And you know, the sandworms looked pretty cool, and but they still looked also kind of dull too. I don't know how to explain it. I don't even know if I did a good explanation of this movie at all. A lot of it's metaphorical and symbolic of things that have gone on in the real world. Like I said, Europe's treatment of the Middle East, how it doesn't think highly of it or the people who live in it, but it just wants to mine it for its very super valuable resources, and doesn't care what it does to anyone who's there in the process. But yeah, the movie ends with House Atreides in shambles, Paul and his mother going off into the desert to join the Fremen, and House Harkonnen having retaken control of Arrakis with the aid of the Emperor this time. So now he and the House Harkonnen and House Corino are very much in cahoots. Oh, but we'll see what happens next in the next movie. Whenever the fuck that'll come out. But yeah, that should be a good one. I hope. Speaking of good one, I think this is as good as this is gonna get. So yeah, Dune 2021. I give it a thumb up. I don't think it's the best movie I'm going to watch this year, even though the year's almost over. But there's a bunch of movies coming out in the next couple months. Or, not couple months, the next month. There's only a month left. In the next month. But it was good. I liked it. I look forward to this. Certainly enough to make me look forward to the sequel. So yeah, Dune 2021. Good movie. I'd recommend it. Unless you don't like long science fiction epics, then In which case, yeah, don't watch that. You're not gonna like it. But yeah, all right. That's it for me. This is going on too long, and I'm tired. Have a good one, folks.